Mysteries and foundations, riddles within the Vatican walls have always captured the imagination of historians, philosophers, and curious minds from all walks of life. The institution known as the Holy See holds an extraordinary amount of documentation that dates back through centuries of political upheaval, theological debates, and cultural transformations. Much of that material remains buried in closed archives, inaccessible to most people, fueling endless speculation. From letters that changed the fate of empires to artifacts that push the boundaries between faith and legend, the Vatican's hidden stores simultaneously fascinate and unsettle observers around the globe. While there are those who see the air of secrecy as essential to protecting religious orthodoxy, others believe that the revelation stored within could reshape our understanding of Western civilization if fully unveiled. Today, we begin our journey into some of these enthralling mysteries, starting with a historically pivotal document once lost among the Vatican stacks and the seldom discussed legacy of African popes. Let us begin with the curious case of King Henry VIII's letter of divorce, a piece of correspondence that shaped the entire religious landscape of Europe in the 16th century. King Henry VIII, desperate for a male heir, and dissatisfied with his long-time marriage to Queen Catherine of Aragon, requested special permission from Pope Clement VII to dissolve this union. At the heart of his demand was not merely romantic desire, but also dynastic urgency. He needed a legitimate son to secure the Tudor dynasty and thwart rival claims to the English throne. However, his bold request was outright refused by the Pope, who recognized that granting an annulment to such a high-profile monarch would bring severe political consequences and might undermine the sanctity of marriage in the eyes of Catholics everywhere. This denial, as we all know, ignited a crisis. Henry VIII broke away from the Church in Rome and established the Church of England, naming himself its supreme head. From this watershed, Europe's religious unity fragmented, fueling theological disputes and power struggles that lasted for centuries. For a long time, Henry's original letter was thought to be lost in the labyrinth of Vatican archives. It remained out of sight for hundreds of years while scholars tried to unravel the nuances of the schism that forever altered the trajectory of Western Christianity. When the letter was finally rediscovered in the early 20th century, it confirmed the complexity of the king's motivations and exposed the delicate diplomatic balancing act that the Pope had to perform. Though seemingly just parchment and ink, its significance underscores how a single document can change the spiritual and cultural map of the world. Moving from England's turbulence to a less-known aspect of Catholic history, we encounter the African popes. When people think of the papacy, images of white European clergymen come to mind typically from areas such as Rome, Paris, or other significant urban centers of medieval Europe. Yet the Church's early history was not as narrowly European as many might believe. Indeed, three influential popes hailed from North Africa: Saint Victor, Saint Miltiades, and Saint Gelasius, and their achievements were fundamental in shaping critical aspects of early Christian doctrine and practice. Saint Victor III, who reigned at the close of the 2nd century, 189 to 199, resolved a monumental dispute regarding the date of Easter, determining it should be observed on a Sunday rather than on variable days, thereby unifying Christian communities across diverse regions. Saint Miltiades, at the dawn of the 4th century, guided the Church through an era when Christianity has just been legalized, marking a shift from clandestine worship to sanctioned public rites. His decision to hold Mass in Latin rather than Greek laid the groundwork for Western liturgical traditions. Then Saint Gelasius, in the late 5th century, was acclaimed for stressing moral reform service to the poor and firm opposition to lingering pagan practices. Not only did their African heritage testify to the geographical breadth of early Christianity, but it also underscored an inclusivity that is often overlooked in modern discussions. Thus, before we even progress further into these labyrinthine secrets, the intriguing narratives of Henry VIII's letter of divorce and the African popes serve as reminders that the Vatican's stored records carry stories of global consequence. This synergy of personal ambition, theological principle, and cultural diversity foreshadows all that is yet to come. Knights Templar and the Vatican's exorcist army. Shifting our focus to the Knights Templar, we encounter a military order enveloped in myth and marked by a shocking downfall. Founded in the early 12th century to protect pilgrims journeying to the Holy Land, the Templars amassed incomparable military strength and financial resources within a century. Their rapid ascent to power drew the attention and envy of European monarchs, most notably King Philip IV of France. Worried that the Templars could destabilize his power, King Philip accused the order of heresy, launching mass arrests, seizing assets, and orchestrating infamous trials. Under brutal torture, many Templars falsely confessed to sacrilegious acts. Ultimately, Pope Clement V, succumbing to intense pressure from the French crown, dissolved the order in 1312, sealing the tragic fate of many knights who were burned at the stake. One of the most stunning twists in this saga came nearly 700 years later in the early 2000s, when the Vatican released a previously unknown document known as the Chinon Parchment. This startling record revealed that Pope Clement V had privately absolved the Knights Templar of heresy, asserting that the confessions extracted under torture were not valid. Yet political demands forced him to declare the order's dissolution, leading them to an unjust doom. While the Templars perished, their mystique lives unbolstered by legends about hidden treasures and advanced knowledge that some claim the Templars carried into secrecy. Their tragic story offers a stark example of the interplay between ecclesiastical authority and dynastic ambition. From medieval conspiracies, we leap to a contemporary phenomenon, the Vatican's exorcist army. It might surprise some that the Holy See officially maintains training programs and networks of priests dedicated to exorcism. Each year, Rome hosts a specific course titled Exorcism and the Prayer of Liberation, designed to educate priests on diagnosing and responding to what believers identify as demonic possessions. Since 2005, this yearly seminar has attracted hundreds of clergy from over 50 countries, reflecting an enduring and, by some accounts, intensifying global demand for exorcisms. Why is there a surge in reported possessions and exorcisms, especially in places like Italy, where an estimated 500,000 people annually seek exorcist rites? Some theorize that with the waning influence of traditional religious structures in modern society, people yearn for metaphysical explanations to address psychological or situational crises. Social media has also played a role amplifying the conversation around supernatural afflictions and fueling calls for spiritual intervention. Regardless of one's perspective, whether skeptical or devout, the Vatican's systematic expansion of exorcism training underscores the Church's resolution to engage in a practice that merges ritual with deep-rooted tradition. It also prompts introspection about how these ancient rites fit into a technologically advanced era, raising questions about mental health, faith, and human vulnerability. The existence of such a cadre of exorcists breaks with the assumption that Catholic rituals are solely about mass confession and sacramental observances. It highlights the belief that there are still corners of reality that science struggles to illuminate, and, for many believers, the Church stands as a bulwark against malevolent forces. This multifaceted dimension where historical conspiracies coexist with present-day spiritual battles reveals just how broad the spectrum of Vatican secrets can be. Donation of Constantine and Moses as Prince Thutmose. Next, we delve into one of the most consequential forgeries in Church history, the donation of Constantine. This document ostensibly dated back to the 4th century and purported that the Roman Emperor Constantine, upon receiving a miraculous cure from leprosy, bequeathed supreme authority over the western half of the Roman Empire to Pope Sylvester I. For medieval popes, the donation served as a potent political weapon. Kings were coaxed into ceding lands and privileges to the papacy under the impression that they were merely fulfilling the arrangement made by Constantine centuries earlier. However, in the 15th century, linguistic and textual analysis by the Italian scholar Lorenzo Valla exposed the document as an 8th century forgery. Utilizing a revolutionary approach for his era, Valla identified anachronisms and words that simply did not exist in Constantine's time. This revelation triggered a major upheaval, prompting Europeans to question not just papal authority, but also the authenticity of other revered texts. Indeed, the ability of the Catholic Church to exert dominance across vast swaths of territory had partially rested on a piece of paper that was neither ancient nor legitimate. The shock from Valla's findings reverberated long afterward, forming one of the early milestones of the Renaissance that championed classical scholarship and skeptical inquiry. Meanwhile, an entirely different kind of controversy rages around the identity of Moses as possibly Prince Thutmose of ancient Egypt. The biblical narrative portrays Moses as the divinely chosen savior of the Israelites, leading them out of Egypt across the parted Red Sea. Yet some scholars argue that this remarkable story might align with real Egyptian history if we assume that Moses was actually a member of the royal family, specifically a prince named Thutmose, son of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. The linguistic similarity is one tantalizing clue. Thutmose in Egyptian has a strong resemblance to Moses in Hebrew. If this theory holds, the biblical account of Moses being cast out or removing himself from the throne in a bold quest for freedom and a new covenant with God might reflect an actual royal conflict. According to various interpretations, Thutmose, stripped of inheritance or overshadowed by more influential heirs, departed with a group of loyalists. Thus, the crossing of the Red Sea could be both a spiritual miracle and a real-world exodus from Egyptian territory toward the Levant, where new religious beliefs would eventually take root. Proponents also point to subtle similarities in religious rituals. Ancient Hebrew customs appear to share certain motifs with Egyptian spiritual practice. Yet this theory is far from being universally accepted. There is no undisputed archaeological evidence tying Moses to Thutmose, leaving academics in a scholarly deadlock between traditional biblical literalism and more revisionist approaches that aim to contextualize biblical figures within known historical frameworks. Regardless, the notion that Moses might have been Egyptian royalty adds an alluring dimension to an already powerful story of liberation. It also reminds us how religious narratives layered with centuries of faith can coincide with or diverge from mainstream historical records in intricate ways. And in the Vatican's archives, it is entirely conceivable that some references, letters, translations, or fragments could shed further light on the matter locked away until deemed appropriate for scholarly perusal. Apocalypse of Gabriel and the Rainbow Body of Jesus. Moving on, the Apocalypse of Gabriel stands as a significant discovery within the sphere of religious archaeology. Carved onto a stone tablet and said to date from the 1st century BCE or the dawn of the Common Era, this artifact is sometimes referred to as Gabriel's Revelation or Hazon Gabriel. Scholars have hailed it as one of the most impactful finds since the Dead Sea Scrolls, because it may reframe our understanding of messianic beliefs that predate Christianity. Among its many tantalizing lines, one especially stands out. "In 3 days you shall live, I, Gabriel, command you." For some, this phrase rings eerily similar to the Christian concept of Jesus rising from the dead after 3 days. However, if the dating is correct, the reference existed in Jewish apocalyptic or messianic traditions before Jesus' lifetime. Such an implication challenges centuries of theological assumptions. If the motif of a rising Savior was already in circulation, what does that say about originality versus borrowing of religious concepts across close-knit cultures in the ancient Near East? With no clear consensus, the Apocalypse of Gabriel unsettles both Jewish and Christian paradigms, potentially indicating that the iconic notion of resurrection was deeply interwoven into Second Temple Jewish thought well before the Gospels were written. Because of its potentially game-changing significance, many suspect that certain high-level religious institutions might prefer it remain obscured from mainstream public discourse. Equally evocative is the idea of the rainbow body of Jesus, which entwines Christian narratives with Buddhist spiritual concepts. In Christian scripture, there is a scene known as the Transfiguration, where Jesus appears radiant and seemingly transfigured before the apostles, Peter, James, and John. Some modern thinkers propose that this moment hints at what Tibetan Buddhism calls the rainbow body, a state of ultimate enlightenment in which a spiritual master's physical form transforms into pure light at death. While the typical Western Christian interpretation highlights Jesus' divinity, Eastern philosophies underscore the possibility that he achieved an enlightened state that shares parallels with advanced Buddhist practitioners. Believers in this intersectional concept suggest that Jesus might have been exposed to Eastern teachings during the so-called lost years not covered in the New Testament, or that his universal message of compassion, renunciation of worldly attachments, and inner transformation aligns closely with fundamental Buddhist tenets. Of course, official church doctrine has never endorsed this viewpoint. In fact, it has historically guarded against ideas that might diminish Jesus' unique status within Christian theology. Nonetheless, such speculation opens intriguing questions. Could the historical Jesus have traveled east, Or was there cross-pollination of religious ideas through trade routes and cultural exchanges in the ancient world? Might the Catholic Church harbor documents supporting these parallels, hiding them so as not to confuse or scandalize the faithful? In the absence of definitive proof, the rainbow body notion remains an enticing but unproven possibility. Whatever one's stance, the debate exemplifies how spiritual traditions can converge on similar themes such as transcendence of the physical form. Whether or not the Vatican is actively stifling scholarship on this topic, the conversation persists as part of a wider re-evaluation of how major world religions developed and possibly influenced each other in subtle yet impactful ways. Magic Book of Pope Honorius III and the Vatican's Secret Court. Among the more fantastical mysteries connected to Catholic tradition is the infamous Magic Book, said to be authored by Pope Honorius III. Historically, Pope Honorius III, 1216 to 1227, was revered for his administrative finesse and devotion to the Church, but legends persist that link him to a grimoire known as the Grimoire of Pope Honorius. This text allegedly sets out complex rituals for summoning spirits, invoking both heavenly angels and dangerous demonic entities, rituals one would never expect to see associated with a pontiff who represented the highest moral authority in Christendom. Curiously, the earliest known printings of the grimoire emerged in the 17th century, centuries after the Pope's death. In a period rife with superstition and esoteric pursuits, attributing a magical compendium to a revered pope would vastly increase the book's mystique and credibility in the eyes of would-be practitioners. This timing strongly suggests a hoax or at least a strategic repackaging of older esoteric traditions under Pope Honorius's name. Nonetheless, some conspiracy-minded observers insist that the original text might well date from Honorius III's time and was suppressed because it dangerously contradicted official church condemnation of witchcraft and magic. While official church channels dismiss the notion that a pope could pen such a spell book, the narrative prompts reflection on the tangled relationship between faith and the occult in medieval and Renaissance Europe. For many believers, magic was either a misguided or a demonic path, something that the church systematically combated. Yet ironically, the same spiritual infrastructure that recognized miracles, relics, and exorcisms could also inadvertently sustain an undercurrent of magical belief. The continuing fascination around the grimoire is a testament to how easily lines can blur between the sacred and the esoteric, particularly when power and fear intermix. In a different vein, the Vatican's secret court, formerly known as the Apostolic Penitentiary, symbolizes another dimension of ecclesiastical secrecy. Established more than 8 centuries ago, this tribunal attends to sins so grave that only the Pope or those explicitly delegated can absolve them. Cases that reach the Apostolic Penitentiary often involve desecration of the Eucharist, the extreme abuse of clerical office, or violations tied to the sanctity of confession. Because these matters are deemed deeply sensitive, the entire process unfolds behind strict confidentiality, and the records remain sealed long after each case is concluded. In recent years, selected documents have been made partially accessible, shining some light on the complexity of moral dilemmas handled here. Nonetheless, the essential confidentiality means the public can only guess at the breadth of these cases, which may contain bombshell revelations about the darkest corners of clerical misconduct. Moreover, the existence of this secret court underscores the hierarchical structure of the Church, demonstrating that while everyday transgressions can be forgiven through standard confessional channels, only the highest echelons of ecclesiastical power address certain categories of mortal wrongdoing. Between rumors of pontifical grimoires and clandestine judicial proceedings, these examples reveal the dual nature of the Vatican's hidden dimension. On one hand, possibly containing lurid or exotic secrets connected to mystical practices. On the other, methodically safeguarding the moral authority of the Catholic institution through hidden tribunals. This interplay of whispered rumors and official processes is part of what makes the Vatican's legacy so intricate and, in the eyes of many, endlessly enthralling. Nazi escape routes, perhaps one of the most disturbing pieces of Vatican-related history, involves the escape of Nazis after World War II, facilitated through what has come to be called rat lines. In the immediate aftermath of the war, Europe lay in devastation. Allied forces and emerging international tribunals were eager to prosecute Nazi war criminals, especially those complicit in atrocities ranging from genocide to lethal medical experiments. Yet an astonishing number, some estimate up to 90% of these individuals, managed to flee, often crossing through Italy, before securing safe passage to South America or the Middle East. The question arises, how did they so easily evade detection? And justice research indicates that certain Catholic clergy, among them the controversial Bishop Alois Hudal, played a central role in forging documents, providing shelter in monasteries, and leveraging church charity networks. Although it is inaccurate to claim the Vatican as an institution officially endorsed these operations, elements within the Church formed an underground railroad for Nazi fugitives. To compound the scandal, the International Red Cross unwittingly provided many of these criminals with temporary travel papers, not always realizing their true identities. The presence of supportive priests gave the rat lines a veneer of credibility. Some fugitives even resided on church-owned properties for months. Perhaps the most notorious figure to benefit from these routes was Adolf Eichmann, who oversaw the logistics of the Holocaust, ultimately fleeing to Argentina. Others included Joseph Mengele, infamous for lethal experiments in concentration camps, also rumored to have passed through these clandestine paths before settling under an alias. Unraveling the full extent of church involvement is daunting. Many documents remain sealed, and the official Vatican stance is that while individual clergy may have aided the escapees for humanitarian reasons, the Church as a whole did not sanction this. Critics argue that a murky combination of anti-communist paranoia, moral misjudgment, and residual sympathy for Nazi ideology created an environment where evil acts could go unpunished. Regardless of one's interpretation, the rat lines remain a glaring reminder that the Catholic institution, like any centuries-old body, houses moral contradictions. Despite preaching reconciliation and penance, parts of its network facilitated the flight of some of history's most egregious criminals, potentially out of fear of communism or a misguided sense of mercy. For anyone seeking a simple moral portrait of the Church, the story of rat lines disrupts that narrative, laying bare how politics, theology, and personal biases can intersect to produce a deeply troubling chapter in the annals of Vatican history. In these opening explorations of the Vatican's hidden world, we have touched on a wide spectrum of narratives, from the intimate personal desire of King Henry VIII that fractured European Christendom to the improbable ascendance and tragic downfall of the Knights Templar and onward to the puzzling presence of an alleged magical grimoire attributed to a 13th century pope. We have also examined the complexities surrounding African pontiffs, recognized the official training for an exorcist corps, and encountered unnerving allegations about the Vatican's role, or at least certain clergy members' complicity, in smuggling Nazis to freedom after World War II. At every twist, these accounts challenge the simplistic dichotomy of a purely pious institution. Instead, they illustrate an enduring organization shaped by the interplay of faith, ambition, diplomacy, and at times, moral failures. The Catholic Church is in many respects a reflection of humanity itself, embodying noble aspirations, fervent devotion, and regrettable misjudgments. More than just a religious entity, the Vatican operates as a sovereign city-state, with political concerns, institutional memory, and an internal legal structure that can clash with wider societal values. The central tension running through these tales is the line between revelation and secrecy. That which is withheld often kindles greater intrigue, a forgotten letter that once triggered schisms, a suppressed papal trial document that could rewrite our understanding of medieval heresy, or a mystical tradition that might connect Christian teachings with Eastern enlightenment. Yet no matter how cryptic these secrets may appear, they serve as windows into the dynamic evolution of religious thought and practice over millennia. With this broad overview in place, we will next delve into more startling stories, hidden codes embedded in sacred texts. The possibility that key biblical narratives were heavily inspired by outside traditions or even fabricated altogether, and the surprising instances in which Catholics themselves have questioned the Church's fundamental narratives. In Part 2, we continue our journey deeper into the labyrinth of seldom discussed documents and artifacts, exploring how they speak to the tension between faith and inquiry, continuity and reform. Your reflections and thoughts are invaluable, so feel free to pause and comment here on what has piqued your interest. When you are ready, let us press on to the next segment. Coded stories and challenged beliefs. The Bible Code and the Christ myth. Welcome to the second stage of our exploration, where themes of interpretation, authenticity, and potential misinformation take center stage. Here we gaze into topics that question the building blocks of Christian faith and the texts that have shaped human history. From numerical codes rumored to predict the course of civilization to theories that cast doubt on the very existence of the central figure of Christianity, these controversies can inspire both awe and alarm. For the devout, reinterpreting or challenging Scripture borders on heresy. For critics or seekers of truth, it is a logical continuation of scholarship and a natural facet of humanity's enduring quest for certainty. At the forefront of this segment is the phenomenon called the Bible Code, a modern puzzle that emerged in popular culture following Michael Drosnin's best-selling book. His argument claims that the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, when read with a specific algorithm, reveals hidden messages predicting events like the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and numerous other global turning points. The method, referred to as equidistant letter sequencing (ELS), involves skipping letters at fixed intervals to form words and phrases. The resulting discoveries appear to unearth cryptic prophecies that some interpret as proof of a supernatural hand guiding the composition of Scripture. However, mathematical skeptics quickly objected, showing that similar coded predictions can be found in any sufficiently large text, from Moby Dick to more contemporary writings, if one cherry-picks intervals or forcibly interprets patterns. This led many scholars to conclude that the predictions identified by the Bible code are simply coincidences arising from a large corpus of letters. Despite this rational explanation, the notion of a hidden code persists, thanks in part to deep-seated hopes that the divine might communicate with humanity in cryptic ways. Some believers suggest the code is real but misapplied by certain authors, whereas others see it as a seductive but ultimately flawed venture into pseudo-religious numerology. Even more radical is the theory of the Christ myth, which proposes that Jesus Christ was never a historical figure at all. From this perspective, Jesus is an amalgam of earlier mythological archetypes found in various ancient cultures. Similar motifs: a virgin birth, the performance of miracles, a redemptive death, and a return from the grave, are present in multiple pre-Christian mythologies, including Egyptian and Greco-Roman traditions. Scholars who promote the Christ myth viewpoint challenge the Gospels as historically reliable documents, pointing out that they were written decades, if not generations, after the events they describe, and that no substantial contemporary non-Christian sources corroborate Jesus' life. Critics of this theory counter that while accounts of Jesus indeed surfaced later, there are references in Roman and Jewish writings, albeit somewhat brief, that at least outline an itinerant preacher named Jesus. Moreover, the deeply rooted global faith tradition based on his teachings strongly suggests that a real founder figure existed, even if embellished over time. Within the Vatican rumors abound of documents that might definitively settle this debate, potentially revealing that early church fathers constructed a figure for the sake of uniting communities or instilling moral order in a fractured society. However, no conclusive evidence has ever emerged publicly. Whether the Christ myth is credible or outlandish, its persistence underscores just how fragile and simultaneously resilient religious traditions can be, once deeply woven into culture. The Scythians and women as priests. Continuing deeper, we encounter the Scythians, an ancient Gnostic group predating early Christianity, whose theology was starkly at odds with what eventually became Orthodox belief. The Scythians revered Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, as a divine incarnation carrying secret knowledge intended to liberate humanity from the illusion of the physical world. They posited the existence of a supreme invisible god, but also recognized a malevolent demiurge called Yaldabaoth, who entrapped souls in material existence. Eating from the tree of knowledge in Eden was, in their eyes, the courageous act of seeking hidden wisdom against the repressive cosmic system. Their ideology blended strands of Hellenistic philosophy, especially Platonic thought, with Jewish traditions, creating a syncretic worldview that emphasized salvation through secret revelations. For the Scythians, salvation meant awakening the divine spark within transcending bodily confines and reuniting with the ultimate Godhead beyond the cosmos. Of course, these notions positioned them in direct conflict with a more hierarchical Christianity that coalesced in the 4th century. The Church's suppression of Gnostic sects, labeling them as heretical forced movements like the Scythians to go underground, eventually vanishing or morphing into other esoteric currents. Nonetheless, recovered texts, such as those found at Nag Hammadi in the mid-20th century, have rekindled interest in how wide-ranging early Christian thought really was, and how many alternative interpretations of biblical stories were once in circulation. An equally hotly debated topic in ecclesiastical circles is the issue of women as priests. While contemporary Catholic doctrine firmly holds that priestly ordination is reserved for men, evidence in places like the 2nd century Priscilla, catacombs challenges this stance. Frescoes depict women in poses that seem reminiscent of celebrating Eucharist or fulfilling liturgical roles, a direct contradiction to the later dogma that bars women from ordination. Some theologians and archaeologists argue that these images simply reflect symbolic piety or the recognition of women's devotion rather than literal leadership in liturgical roles. Others assert that the catacombs prove, at least in certain early Christian communities, women actively served in roles parallel to those of priests. The Catholic Church has historically been emphatic that it continues the tradition established by Jesus and his apostles, claiming no precedent for female priests. Detractors of this view counter that scriptures do not explicitly forbid women from becoming spiritual leaders, and that female leaders, such as Phoebe in the early Christian movement, performed comparable responsibilities. Across modern Christendom, many denominations do allow female ordination, but the Vatican remains resistant, citing long-established tradition and theological interpretations. If additional artwork or manuscripts were discovered, confirming that women once conducted Eucharistic rites, the Church would face intense pressure to reconcile its current dogma with a possibly more egalitarian past. Could there be relevant documents hidden in the vast papal archives, locked away to avoid igniting doctrinal controversy? Some activists and scholars believe so, maintaining that the official position is maintained partly by limiting access to that historical record. This tension between preserving long-standing doctrine and confronting possible evidence of women's leadership is just one example of how institutional memory can suppress or reinterpret traces of diversity in early Christian worship. It is a story that resonates whenever re-examination of the past yields findings that clash with modern authority structures. Letter of Mary Queen of Scots, 18, and the Michelangelo extortion case. From religious debates, our timeline shifts to a personal tragedy documented by the Church, the letter of Mary Queen of Scots. Mary Stuart, a devout Catholic in a largely Protestant Britain, lived a life fraught with political turmoil. Ascending to the Scottish throne in her infancy, she faced numerous conspiracies, alliances, and betrayals. Eventually forced to flee to England, Mary found herself imprisoned by her cousin, Queen Elizabeth, who perceived her as a threat to English sovereignty. From the walls of Fotheringhay Castle, Mary penned an urgent appeal to Pope Sixtus XXXV on November 23, 1586. In this French-language letter, she recounted her sufferings, pleaded her innocence, and implored the Pope's intervention for her release. Yet no relief came. The Pope did not respond, possibly swayed by political pressures or uncertain how to handle a case that risked inflaming tensions with England. Mary was swiftly tried for treason and executed. In the hush of the Vatican archives, her letter has been preserved through the centuries, a testament to the interplay of faith monarchy and the devastating cost of power struggles in early modern Europe. It is said that even reading Mary's pleas can evoke haunting visions of a woman attempting to cling to her faith in an era dominated by brutal realpolitik. In a distinctly different brand of intrigue, the Michelangelo extortion case burst onto headlines in 2015 when the Vatican publicly admitted that 2 lost letters of Michelangelo had been stolen in 1997 and that an anonymous individual was demanding €100,000 for their return. For nearly 2 decades, the theft remained under wraps, underscoring the culture of secrecy that still pervades some corners of Vatican bureaucracy. The stolen papers allegedly included one handwritten note from Michelangelo and another bearing only his signature, both dating to the Renaissance period. Michelangelo Buonarroti is synonymous with some of the Vatican's most hallowed artistic treasures, from the frescoes of the Sistine Chapel to the architectural wonder of St. Peter's Basilica. Any original letter, no matter how brief, is priceless, offering rare insight into the inner thoughts of a man whose creative genius shaped the visual culture of Catholicism. The would-be extortionists vanished, and the whereabouts of these letters remain unknown. While the Vatican refused to bow to ransom demands, the affair illuminated the vulnerability of historical treasures in an age where black market collectors might pay astronomical sums. It also raised uncomfortable questions about why the theft was hushed up for so long, perhaps to protect the Vatican's reputation as a secure repository of priceless artifacts. On a broader scale, these 2 stories, though separated by centuries, underscore how the Vatican's archives and storerooms are not mere repositories of theological documents. They also hold correspondences that reveal personal anguish, political entanglements, and cultural jewels. Whether it's a doomed queen seeking divine advocacy, or a silent scandal surrounding the relics of a Renaissance titan, each case stands as a reflection of how intimately the Catholic establishment has been woven into the very fabric of Western historical experience. Crucifixion, conspiracy, and the trial of Galileo. We now come to a pair of controversies, one that questions the theological climax of the Christian story, and another that symbolizes the age-old friction between faith and science. Some researchers claim an explosive hypothesis that Jesus' crucifixion was a staged conspiracy. According to this unorthodox theory, Roman governor Pontius Pilate might have secretly cooperated with Jesus' followers to orchestrate an execution that never fully took place. The crucial turning point proponents suggest was when Jesus was offered a sponge soaked in vinegar, which may have been infused with a sedative to induce a coma-like state. Believed dead Jesus was lowered from the cross alive, only to be revived in secrecy before reappearing 3 days later. If any authentic evidence or Vatican-held document definitively proved this, it would shake Christianity's central pillar, the belief in Christ's redemptive death and miraculous resurrection. Unsurprisingly, no mainstream scholar or official church source validates this claim, largely dismissing it as fringe speculation. Yet the conspiracy continues to swirl among alternative historians and certain esoteric circles who see the strict confidentiality of some Vatican materials as proof of a cover-up. In the Church's viewpoint, such a notion denies both the spiritual significance and the historical accounts of the Passion narratives which thousands of Christian martyrs and theologians have championed as literal truth. By contrast, the trial of Galileo is grounded in well-documented historical fact. Galileo Galilei, the brilliant 17th-century astronomer, argued for the heliocentric model in which the Earth orbits the Sun, a concept initially championed by Nicholas Copernicus. The Catholic Church committed to Aristotelian cosmology and biblical passages interpreted to affirm Earth's central place in the universe condemned Galileo's findings as heretical. Summoned to Rome in 1633, Galileo was ultimately forced to recant under threat of torture, spending the remainder of his life under house arrest. His seminal observations confirming phases of Venus and the moons orbiting Jupiter had challenged the conventional worldview upheld by church leaders. Within the closed halls of the Vatican, transcripts of Galileo's trial and the subsequent rulings were kept away from public scrutiny for centuries. Only in the late 20th century did the Vatican fully acknowledge that Galileo had been wrongly condemned. Pope John Paul II issued a formal statement in 1992, effectively apologizing for the Church's historical mistake. For many, this event symbolizes the tension between dogmatic authority and scientific progress, a tension that in various forms persists in contemporary debates over issues such as bioethics, evolution, and cosmology. Galileo's predicament powerfully illustrates how radical new ideas often face stubborn resistance from deeply entrenched institutions, even when those institutions are dedicated to the pursuit of truth and spiritual salvation. Whether pointing to a hypothesized plot around the crucifixion or analyzing a documented case of ecclesiastical resistance to empirical proof, these instances underscore a deeper truth the Church, like any human institution, has, at times, had to reconcile established doctrine with emerging evidence. And the gravity of these controversies, whether real or rumored, underscores the potent hold that the Vatican has on the narratives that shape our collective past. The silver hammer and bejeweled skeletons. From cosmic debates, we pivot to the solemn drama of papal transitions. An old and somewhat macabre tradition surrounds the death of a pope involving what is colloquially called the silver hammer ritual. According to accounts of this now largely symbolic procedure upon a pope's demise, the Camerlengo, the papal chamberlain ensures the pontiff is truly deceased by calling out his name 3 times. If there is no response, he gently taps the pope's forehead 3 times with a small silver hammer. Only then is the pope's death officially pronounced. The same hammer is used to smash the fisherman's ring, an emblem of papal authority, signifying the end of one pontificate and the need to convene a conclave to elect the next. There is uncertainty about whether the tapping aspect still takes place. Contemporary Vatican practice may have streamlined the process to rely on medical experts rather than archaic symbolic gestures. Nevertheless, the anecdote surrounding the silver hammer persists, a grim vestige of older ceremonial norms that highlight the Church's keen attention to formalities. While some find it morbid, others see beauty in these carefully choreographed rites, illustrating the reverence and continuity that the Church upholds in times of institutional transition. Far more visually dramatic is the legacy of the bejeweled skeletons discovered across various Catholic churches in Europe. Hundreds of thousands of bones were originally stored in the Roman catacombs, belonging to the early Christian faithful who perished during persecution, plagues, or dire poverty. In the 16th and 17th centuries, as the Protestant Reformation threatened the Church's standing, Vatican officials sought to rekindle Catholic fervor by presenting relics with sensational appeal. Monks meticulously reassembled skeletons from the catacombs, declaring them to be those of ancient martyrs, even though documentation was often thin or non-existent. These remains were then clothed in lavish finery, embroidered silks, gilded armor, and precious jewels arrayed in elaborate patterns. Some skeletons were adorned with crowns or brandished scepters exuding a regal, otherworldly aura. Transported throughout Europe, these holy bodies drew crowds eager for miracles, blessings, or simply spectacle. While some Catholics viewed the relics with unwavering devotion, Protestant critics denounced the practice as a theatrical display of wealth that undermined the spirituality of true faith. Over time, especially during the Enlightenment, skepticism regarding the authenticity of these skeletons intensified, prompting some regions to bury or hide them once again. Nevertheless, a number of churches in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland still proudly exhibit these haunting reminders of the Counter-Reformation era, their jeweled bones gleaming in candlelight. The question remains, were any of these skeletons truly saints, or were they assigned holy status purely for propaganda? The story of the bejeweled skeletons epitomizes a moment when the Church harnessed theatrical religious expression to reassert influence, bridging faith and the material realm in a macabre yet mesmerizing manner. 30 pieces of silver, Jewish treasure in the Vatican basement. No biblical story of betrayal surpasses that of Judas Iscariot, infamous for delivering Jesus to authorities for a mere 30 silver coins. While the Gospels specify the sum, they do not precisely describe these coins' subsequent fate, though it's written that they were eventually used to purchase a burial field. In ancient Judea, 30 shekels did not constitute a massive fortune. Modern estimates place the value at a few hundred US. Yet the symbolic weight of that transaction remains immense, echoing through the ages as a cautionary tale about treachery. Over time, relics purporting to be one of those 30 coins surfaced in medieval Europe, often appearing in the private hoards of kings or as prized exhibits in church treasuries. Some believed that whoever possessed an actual coin from Judas would be cursed forever, marked by association with the ultimate act of deceit. Others imbued the coins with supernatural properties, claiming they could protect or condemn depending on the bearer's intentions. If these rumored relics exist in the Vatican's vaults, they would form part of the tapestry of myths and beliefs entwining monetary greed and divine narrative. Equally steeped in enigma is the account of the Jewish treasure rumored to be in the Vatican basement, a treasure said to include the 7-branched solid gold menorah carried away by the Roman general and later Emperor Titus after the destruction of Jerusalem's Second Temple in 70 CE. Historical reliefs, notably the Arch of Titus in Rome, depict soldiers hauling the menorah through triumphal processions. After that, references to this treasured artifact practically vanish. Some maintain that the menorah was lost or destroyed. Others assert it was shuttled off to Carthage, recovered by Byzantine forces, and passed among conquerors until it landed in the Vatican. Despite centuries of speculation, the papal authorities have never admitted to possessing the menorah, nor have they categorically denied it. Pilgrims occasionally whisper about glimpses of golden temple vessels in subterranean storerooms, but solid evidence is elusive. The modern Israeli government has even inquired about the whereabouts of the menorah, fueling persistent debates about restitution and religious heritage. Is the Vatican safeguarding these relics to preserve them? Or is it, as some critics posit, fearful of the diplomatic and theological repercussions of acknowledging them? Both the 30 pieces of silver and the storied temple treasures highlight the overlap between biblical history, tangible artifacts, and enduring controversies about rightful ownership. Whether these items remain actual physical relics or are simply legends inflated by centuries of rumor, they evoke powerful questions about tradition memory and the line between veneration and appropriation. As we conclude Part 2, the overarching theme is the constant dialogue between the established narrative and the alternative viewpoints that bubble under the surface. From the Bible code to the Christ myth, from Scythian cosmology to alleged female priests, each controversy invites us to ask whether the institutional church has always been transparent, or whether it has at times exercised its authority to maintain a curated version of religious history. Such curation could be motivated by theological aims preserving unity of belief, or by political expediency shaping Christian identity through selective memory. Equally as striking are the relic-based mysteries from Judas's silver coins and the Jewish temple's menorah to bejeweled skeletons conjured up during the height of the Reformation struggles. In these artifacts, we see how physical objects become powerful signifiers of faith morality or contested heritage. Even if some of these items are more legend than reality, their place in popular imagination is entrenched. The possibility that the Vatican might be concealing or quietly caring for them feeds into age-old ideas about hidden knowledge. Gnosis, guarded by an institution that straddles the lines of spiritual guardianship and worldly dominion. While skepticism can arise when confronting theories about Jesus' crucifixion conspiracy, or references to a cosmic plan embedded in ancient texts, these stories persist because they speak to profound, collective yearnings. The desire for hidden wisdom, the lure of discovering that events and texts might hold deeper patterns, and the suspicion that the official record does not always tell the full tale. Part 2, therefore, underscores both the Church's immense influence on shaping Western civilizational identity and the continuing sense that layers of our shared past remain just out of reach, locked in storerooms or restricted archives. In Part 3, we turn to the last set of mysteries on our list, where the search for powerful relics broadens, and we encounter narratives that revolve around destiny, war, and miraculous artifacts. Once again, feel free to share your insights now, before venturing on. When you are ready, we will continue to the grand finale of our trip through the Vatican's secret corridors. Relics, power, and legend. Stolen holy blood, and secret books of Moses. Welcome to Part 3. Our final segment in this sweeping exploration of Vatican-related mysteries. Here we delve into relics deemed miraculous, alleged magical texts rejected as heretical, and the unending quest for objects rumored to grant power or spiritual insight. Whether or not you embrace the full scope of these stories, they reveal how profoundly religion, politics, and human longing for the divine can intertwine over the centuries. The Vatican, as both a theological heart and a historical archive, stands at the nexus of these intertwined forces, balancing strict guardianship and occasional, if reluctant, transparency. We begin with a rather modern twist, the theft of the holy blood in France. In a small French town, thieves broke into an old church under cover of darkness, aspiring to seize gold or valuable artifacts. Instead, they happened upon a gilded container housing a glass vial purported to contain a few drops of the blood of Jesus. Only upon returning home and inspecting their haul did they realize the relic had no obvious monetary value, but a massive spiritual significance. Terrified of being cursed or hunted for desecrating something so sacred, they sought out a well-known art theft investigator, Arthur Brand, to ensure the container was returned safely and discreetly. In popular Catholic devotion, reliquaries are tangibly linked to holiness. Many believers think that touching or venerating them facilitates divine blessing or spiritual intercession. The narrative of thieves undone by the relic's spiritual gravity reflects not just superstition, but also centuries of lore, framing holy objects as conduits of grace, or conversely as catalysts for dire retribution if misused. This event illustrates a scenario where the intangible worth of faith objects surpasses any potential cache, wineful a testament to how relics still command awe in the modern era. Next, the enigma of the 6th and 7th books of Moses drifts us back to the domain of esoteric texts. Traditional Judaic and Christian Bibles include 5 core books attributed to Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Yet occult folklore claims Moses composed 2 additional volumes passed down secretly from generation to generation. Printed editions, which first emerged in 18th century Germany, overflow with spells for summoning angels and spirits controlling weather, curing ailments, or even raising the dead. Each page reportedly brims with arcane symbols, incantations, and diagrams that claim to channel divine or demonic power. Unsurprisingly, both Jewish and Christian authorities dismiss these texts as forgeries skillfully exploiting Moses' name to capitalize on European obsessions with magic. Some experts postulate that the 6th and 7th books of Moses compiled long-standing magical traditions, but spurious claims tie them to the revered prophet. Still, rumor insists that the Vatican harbors ancient scrolls, actual prototypes of these volumes withheld because the spells within are too potent and too contradictory to church teachings. Though no proof corroborates such legends, the very notion that a biblical prophet might have left behind a clandestine magical compendium underscores the magnetic appeal of esoteric knowledge. It speaks to a perennial tension. How does mainstream religion coexist with mystical practices that at times appear to blur the lines between pious devotion and occult manipulation? Freemason Case and Joan of Arc. Another shadowy corner of church relations concerns the enduring feud with Freemasonry. Since its inception, the Catholic Church has issued multiple declarations and edicts condemning membership in Masonic lodges. The Church's rationale is that Freemasonry, with its secret rites, universalist leanings, and emphasis on individual moral autonomy, clashes with Catholic dogma. One of the most striking modern examples took place in France 2013 when Father Pascal Vezin was stripped of his priestly duties upon revelation that he was a member of a local Masonic lodge. The Vatican demanded immediate renunciation of Freemasonry, reinforcing an old stance that any Catholic who persists in Masonic membership is in a state of grave sin and potentially subject to excommunication. This censure persists, even though many Masons assert they harbor no animosity toward the Church. Indeed, historically numerous Masons self-identified as Christians, seeing no conflict between their lodge's moral ethos and religious convictions. However, from the Church's perspective, Freemasons orchestrate or represent a parallel belief system replete with esoteric symbols and allegiances that overshadow Catholic doctrine. Some conspiratorial circles even speculate that Masonic networks strive to undermine papal authority, carrying forward Enlightenment ideals that challenged absolute religious control. The secrecy inherent in Masonic rituals fuels endless speculation, fueling the Church's suspicion that a hidden agenda lurks behind the lodge doors. We turn now to a luminous yet tragic figure, Joan of Arc, to see how the Church's stance can shift radically over time. Known as the Maid of Orléans, Joan claimed to hear the voices of saints, guiding her to drive out the English in the 100 Years' War. She led French armies to critical victories, earning both adoration and ire. Eventually captured, Joan faced an ecclesiastical trial led by pro-English clergy. Accused of heresy and cross-dressing since she wore armor, she was convicted, branded a witch, and burned at the stake in 1431. Yet the Church later re-evaluated her case, overturning the verdict only 2 decades after her execution. Centuries later, in 1920, the Vatican canonized her as Saint Joan of Arc, reflecting how a woman once labeled a heretic could become a sanctified symbol of courage, faith, and national identity. This radical shift from condemnation to sanctification underscores a broader truth: the Church's interpretations can evolve, shaped by changes in leadership, political context, and theological reflection. Joan's story also highlights how easily politics can bend religious proceedings, proving that even a devout Catholic warrior, guided by spiritual visions, might become a victim of ecclesiastical power plays. Between Freemasonry's ideological defiance and Joan of Arc's retrospective vindication, one sees how fluid the boundary can be between condemnation and commendation. These dynamics remind us of an institution shaped not only by unchanging dogmas, but by the real-world contexts it must navigate. Whether dealing with secretive lodges or defending a saint who once faced accusations of heresy, the Vatican's stances often shift, sometimes dramatically, over the passage of time. Jar of Manna and the Holy Grail. Our expedition into biblical artifacts resumes with the Jar of Manna, a relic mentioned in the Old Testament. According to the book of Exodus, when the Israelites wandered the desert for 40 years, they subsisted on manna, a miraculous food that appeared each morning like dew. As a testament to divine providence, Moses directed Aaron to preserve some manna in a golden jar and place it inside the Ark of the Covenant. Yet, like many relics of antiquity, its trail vanishes, leaving believers and historians alike pondering whether the container might still exist. If it does, it would symbolize not just a miracle of sustenance, but also a covenant between God and His chosen people. Various theories abound. Some believe the jar went missing when invading armies sacked the temple in Jerusalem, smuggling it into far-flung territories. Others claim it remains with the Ark itself, rumored to rest either beneath the Temple Mount, hidden in Ethiopian guardianship, or again ensconced within the Vatican's secret archive. Since direct access to the latter is restricted, every rumor about what it might contain gains heightened allure. The golden jar stands as a testament to that primal biblical moment of trust in divine care, a relic whose rediscovery, if it were ever produced, would profoundly excite religious communities around the globe. Perhaps no other sacred item commands as much widespread attention as the Holy Grail. Mythologized in medieval romances about King Arthur's knights and reimagined in modern fiction, the Grail is traditionally described as the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper, later employed to catch his blood at the crucifixion. Over centuries, it evolved into a talisman of healing and eternal life sought by noble knights and cunning adventurers alike. Even though textual evidence for the Grail's existence is scant in the biblical canon, the concept gained momentum through works like Chrétien de Troyes' Arthurian tales, and Robert de Boron's expansions, which fused Christian miracle themes with chivalric quests. The Templars were soon woven into the Grail legend, leading some to believe they safeguarded it after the Crusades. Modern treasure hunters and conspiracy theorists propose countless resting places hidden beneath Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, tucked away in the Pyrenees, or discreetly protected by a clandestine society. On the fringes of scholarly debate are claims that the Grail might be more metaphorical than literal, a symbol for Christ's bloodline as popularized by speculative works. While the Catholic Church has never officially recognized any specific Holy Grail relic, certain chalices in Europe, like the Valencia chalice, have been honored by tradition as possible contenders. In the swirl of legends and half-truths, the Vatican's official silence or neutrality only adds to the enchantment, fueling perpetual rumors that its archives hold documents revealing the Grail's location or the reality behind its mystique. In both the Manna Jar and the Holy Grail, we see a thread that ties tangible relics to spiritual truths. Whether or not these items exist physically, their narratives guide believers toward concepts of divine generosity, redemption, and transformation. Part of the reason they remain so magnetically attractive is that they encapsulate core Christian ideals: faith, providence, sacrifice, and salvation, the veil of Veronica and nails of the cross. The next two relics pivot back to the Passion narrative, each promising a direct, haunting link to Jesus' final hours. The veil of Veronica stems from extra-biblical tradition, where a woman named Veronica compassionately offers her cloth to Jesus on the Via Dolorosa, wiping sweat and blood from his face. Miraculously, the cloth retains the perfect imprint of his features. While the Gospels do not mention this episode, the image's iconic nature has profoundly shaped Christian art and devotion. Multiple churches claim to own the true veil, the most famous being St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and the Holy Face in Manopello. Scientific investigations on these veils yield inconclusive results, showing no signs of conventional pigments, but also lacking definitive proof of supernatural origin. Interestingly, parallels exist in other legends like the Mandylion of Edessa and the image of King Abgar. Some scholars argue these tales converged, weaving multiple distinct traditions into a single cohesive myth. Others maintain that the authenticity of Veronica's veil stands apart, possibly representing a unique miracle. Despite the Catholic Church's cautious approach in making no decisive ruling, the faithful continue to venerate these veils, seeing them as a tangible sign of divine empathy. The spiritual significance is massive. If the true face of Christ is preserved on cloth, it's a profound testament to God's incarnation and empathy in human suffering. An equally emotive relic is the nails of the cross. Legend claims that Saint Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine, unearthed both the true cross and the nails used at the crucifixion during her 4th century pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Many nails have surfaced over the centuries in reliquaries across Europe, with each church asserting its own set is genuine. Modern archaeology has discovered ancient Roman nails in certain tombs, even linking one pair to the burial site of Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest associated with Jesus' trial. Some researchers see biochemical similarities in the nail's residue and the soil from that site. Yet official conclusions remain murky, as not all experts concur with these interpretations. Complicating the matter, the proliferation of alleged nails, far more than 3 or 4, creates skepticism. Critics denounce these claims as medieval marketing ploys, capitalizing on the fervor for tangible pieces of salvation history. Still, for devotees, each rumored nail is a cherished link to the Passion, symbolizing sacrifice and redemption. The Vatican itself, rarely entering direct debates on these contested relics, continues to hold certain objects in its treasury, leaving the faithful to embrace them as powerful spiritual symbols or relegate them to pious legends. In both cases, it's the bridging of the physical and the divine that enthralls believers. These relics, if genuine, would place worshippers in contact with the holiest events in Christian tradition. Even if spurious, they remind us that from the earliest centuries, Christians have yearned for direct tactile bonds with the sacred narrative, a yearning that launched pilgrimages, built cathedrals, and shaped entire cultural epochs. Spear of Destiny. Few items encapsulate the potent blend of warfare, faith, and mystical promise as fully as the Spear of Destiny, also called the Holy Lance. Legend holds that a Roman centurion named Longinus thrust his lance into Jesus' side to confirm his death, drawing forth both blood and water. Thereafter, the lance was reputed to hold a cosmic force. Some said it offered power over the fate of nations and even the world. Antiquity and the Middle Ages abound with rumors that emperors like Constantine the Great wielded the lance to fortify their reign, crediting it for their military successes. Through the centuries, multiple Spear of Destiny relics surfaced, the most renowned residing in the Hofburg Palace in Vienna. Scientific examination dated this artifact to perhaps the 7th century, so significantly later than the crucifixion. Nonetheless, it was venerated by Holy Roman emperors who believed that rightful possession of the lance conferred divine right and unstoppable might. Napoleon reportedly coveted it, but never acquired it. One of the most unsettling chapters in its modern history involves Adolf Hitler, who, swayed by the legend, arranged for its seizure. Some occult-minded Nazis believed controlling the spear would aid their dream of global supremacy. Eventually, American troops recovered that same lance from a hidden repository after World War II. Debate continues over its authenticity. Many historians dismiss it as a medieval forgery, while esoteric groups maintain that even a replica imbued with centuries of veneration could channel significant metaphysical energy. The Vatican has mostly sidestepped official comment on the Spear of Destiny, though its theological import would be monumental if proven genuine. On a symbolic level, the lance represents humanity's darker impulses, wielding violence in the name of salvation, and the perennial temptation to harness sacred relics for temporal power. The Holy Belt of the Virgin Mary. We reach the climax of our list with an object that reflects both delicate piety and the abiding mystery of sacred artifacts, the Holy Belt of the Virgin Mary. According to a cherished Christian tradition, when the Virgin Mary's earthly life ended, her body was taken into heaven, a belief commemorated as the Assumption. However, tradition holds that the Apostle Thomas, who arrived late, hesitated to believe Mary had truly been assumed. In response, the Virgin appeared to Thomas, bestowing upon him her cincture or belt as proof of her departure from this world. Carried through centuries of devotion, the belt's presence was eventually traced to Italy. In the medieval period, an Italian merchant on pilgrimage to the Holy Land reportedly married into the family that safeguarded the belt and returned with it to his hometown. Over time, local authorities and the church recognized it as a significant relic, venerating it with grand ceremonial events. Today the belt is kept under careful watch in the Cathedral of Prato in Tuscany. It is only displayed to the public on specific feast days, drawing fervent pilgrims and curious tourists who flock to glimpse this intimate symbol of Marian devotion. Why does a simple belt matter so much? For believers, it's not just a fabric, but a tangible anchor tying the faithful to Mary's maternal intercession and to core doctrines surrounding her life and passing. Often overshadowed by relics explicitly connected to Jesus' passion, Mary's belt quietly testifies to an aspect of Christian spirituality focused on maternal compassion and divine grace. The Church's guardianship of such an artifact is also a testament to how small personal items like a belt can accrue immense significance, bridging the divide between ordinary human experiences. Clothing, after all, is mundane and extraordinary. Grace. We have reached the end of our extensive journey through Vatican secrets, legendary artifacts, and hidden documents. 33 of them in total, though in truth there are countless more stories to explore. Across these 3 parts, we have encountered everything from historical bombshells like King Henry VIII's lost letter and the forced dissolution of the Knights Templar to perplexing relics like the Spear of Destiny and the potential presence of the Jewish temple's treasured menorah in Vatican storage rooms. We have also grappled with manuscripts that question or recontextualize biblical narratives, delved into Gnostic sects that challenge official dogmas, and observed how church policy can drastically shift over time, canonizing someone once condemned as a heretic. Taken together, these mysteries underscore a core truth: the Vatican is not merely a passive caretaker of old texts and relics. It is an active agent in shaping how these items and stories are interpreted, preserved, or at times suppressed. For the faithful, these archives and vaults serve as a treasure trove of Christian heritage, upholding essential tenets of doctrine and devotion. For skeptics or secular historians, they present a guarded repository of knowledge where the politics of access can hamper unbiased research. And for everyone else, those who navigate between reverence and curiosity, the possibility that many earth-shattering revelations might still lie within locked rooms fuels endless speculation. If there is a final lesson in these accounts, it may be that faith and mystery often coexist. The Church's historical journey is replete with paradoxes, miraculous tales of healing set against episodes of politics-driven cruelty, calls for moral purity, alongside episodes of complicity in dark deeds and unwavering reverence for relics that sometimes seem more legendary than fact. Yet perhaps that very blend of the sublime and the all-too-human is what keeps the Vatican's mysteries so persistently fascinating. The tension between dogma and hidden truths compels people to keep asking questions and digging deeper. Here we conclude our grand narrative regarding the secrets buried deep in the Vatican. Some real, some alleged, each woven into the larger tapestry of religious history. Thank you for journeying through these 3 parts. Your reflections and commentary are integral to unraveling little by little the possible truths behind these age-old stories. Feel free to share your thoughts on this final installment. And as we close, remember that whether these secrets be wholly factual or partly legendary, they each remind us of humanity's abiding desire to seek the sacred even amidst the corridors of power and secrecy.